We have a very good friend of whoever you know us as, Media Tell, Ad Wanted, Media Leader. Amy Kean was a massive help to me very early when I started on. I'm delighted to welcome Amy to the stage now. She'll explain a bit more about what she's doing, but this is how to level up your voice. Please give Amy a warm welcome.
Hi everyone, how you doing? Right, listen, I'm going to warn you, fucking knackered. I've had a busy week, but I should be fine, Right, so I think I know some faces in the room today. Who do I know? Quite a few of you here. It's lovely. I kind of love that and hate it at the same time. So who here is one of the Media Future 100? Has anyone given you a round of applause yet? No. You fucking legends. So this next session, the next 20 minutes, I think, is all about you, really, and how you use your voice. So think about when you're in a meeting, a workshop, on a Zoom, whatever, how often do you know exactly what you're going to say? Like you've got it planned, you are totally sure of what you're going to say, or how often do you open your mouth and hope for the best? What would you say? Yeah, of course, good. So in my experience, having trained hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in this stuff, it's normally the latter. But there's a reason for that. The reason is we spend all the time talking. We are talking all the time in meetings, in workshops, in social media, and so that's made us really mindless with our voices. But our voices are huge. Our voices are so significant. Our voices are complicated. Our voices are social. Our voices are the outcome of our experience, our backgrounds, our cultures. Our voices are interwoven with our emotions and our trauma occasionally. Our voices are these powerful, fragile things that most people take for granted. I'm not kissing your ass, but every single person in this room is a role model. We have a whole room full of role models. And so every single person in this room genuinely has a responsibility to use your voice in a way that has meaning and to use your voice in a way that adds value. But that's a lot of work. I'm going to talk about that work in the next 20 minutes. 12 minutes? What? I've only got 12 minutes. Have I got 12 minutes? Oh, all right, I might have to speed up. That's awkward. How awkward is this? I'm going to go fast. Right, so, the only learning development company that has its own jingle. We're the only learning and development company in the world, as far as I'm aware, that has its own jingle. And there's two reasons for that. First of all, we're all creatives who moved into training, so we like to do stuff differently. We're not trainers who are trying to be wacky, and I think there's a really important distinction. Secondly, we like to get in your head. We like to get in there and really rummage around and stay there for a little bit. And hopefully in the next 11 minutes, I will do that. So I'm the CEO and Creative Director of Good Shout. Good Shout is a social learning company that helps you experiment with your voice, your talent, and your thinking. And we are entirely founded on the belief that we are all experiments. Every single one of us should consider ourselves to be a walking, talking, living, breathing, sleeping experiment that constantly wants to test ourselves and optimize over time. So the philosopher Alain de Botton said, if you're not embarrassed by who you were 12 months ago, you're not learning enough. And I thoroughly concur. I'm constantly embarrassed. I think of some of the presentations I've done in the past, and I'm like, oh my God, maybe this one. In a year's time, I'll look back. We have a bunch of different courses, so courses in writing, creativity, etc. But in our flagship course, Good Shout, we get people talking, literally. So it's like a couch to 5K for your voice across every single medium. And the thing that we focus on, I mean, obviously, what I really want is for everyone to be themselves and shout, but do it with discipline. And it's the discipline that really matters. Are you clear? Are you memorable? Because you could be the most interesting, confident person ever, but if you don't have the discipline, then you're just adding noise to an already very noisy world. how the hell am I qualified to talk about this? Well, my voice is kind of my job and I'm doing all right with it at the moment. I worked in advertising for about 17 years and no offense, kind of felt my soul start to disintegrate. So I moved, it was a long time though, moved into using my voice full time. I'm a journalist, I've written for Grazia, The Guardian, been on Woman's Hour. I'm a campaign trailblazer, LinkedIn top voice, which is the least cool thing about me, but it's based on data, not kissing arse, which obviously the 100 thing isn't about, obviously. That's also really important. I'm a poet. I have a poetry collection that no one's ever read, but that's fine. People don't read poetry. And more recently, I became a playwright and wrote and produced and starred in a London sold-out play about life coaches. I'm not a fan. So that's why I think I'm qualified. But a few years ago, I wrote a book, a best-selling book, called The Little Girl Who Gave Zero Fucks. Anyone have a copy? Yes! And I wrote it because I had no voice. So I was working in Asia at the time and I was head of strategy for a media agency. I won't name them because I'm about to slag them off. But I was working across Asia Pacific as the head of strategy and I lived in Singapore, but I was traveling all over and I hated it. I hated the culture. My God, was it toxic. People, especially young people, would shake constantly, every single day. And even though I was one of the only senior women in the whole of the region, I was talked over constantly, interrupted, all that jazz, you know the drill. So my confidence was at an all-time low. And I thought, fuck it. I'm going to write a book then. I'm going to try and reclaim this. So I wrote a book about how amazing it would feel if we all worried less. And it really does. So that was the start of my new era, I guess. But I was always told for years that I lacked gravitas. Has anyone else had that feedback? This kind of mythical term that no one can really define. I was always told I lacked gravitas. I didn't really know what they meant. But what do you reckon the formula is for a powerful voice? It's funny because you can see that Margaret Thatcher's there and you probably think I'm going in one direction when I'm not. What do you think the formula is for a powerful voice? Yes, interesting. So, obviously there is no formula for a powerful voice, but some people have, across history, literally changed their voices in order to be more authoritative or appear more authoritative. Here's the example.
Very much so. I've done a good deal of other speaking, but speaking in the House of Commons is quite different. Like... It's a unique experience.
I think we shall have to make up our minds about the cabinet very quickly. Because otherwise the press will...
It was just for the demonstration. So she literally, that was 5 years, she changed her voice so much, and the context is, which not so that many people know, she didn't like women. Margaret Thatcher didn't like women. So she changed her voice to sound like a man because she preferred men, because she thought men had more power. But in reality, there is no formula for a great voice. Let me give you quite an extreme example.
How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering, people are dying, entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
So in theory, she doesn't have a powerful voice because she's a child. She was crying. But that's going to go down as one of the most powerful speeches of all time because she was impassioned, she knew exactly what she wanted to say, and there was no word wasted whatsoever. Do you like your voice? Who here likes their voice? Yes, oh my God. You know what, this is more than I normally get. So good for you, good for you. That's brilliant. Everyone should like their voice. Who likes it when they hear it recorded? Right, so I've got good news and bad news about that. So the good news is you're not alone. It's a thing called voice confrontation. So it's something to do with the shape of the bones in your ears. The sound you hear inside your head is literally different to the sound that it is outside of your head that other people hear. The bad news is what you hear when it's recorded is how your voice sounds. I'm so sorry, but you're going to have to get used to it. But why do we judge our voices so much? We judge our voices so much because we judge other people's voices, don't you? What do you judge? Kind of giving you the... So the voice is the primary way that we judge people. in society, particularly in Britain, my God. So any single one of us has 7 seconds in a first impression scenario for people to make 11 different judgments about us. Based on, so it's our voice, our body language and our aesthetics, but primarily our voice, our accent. And those 11 different judgments are intellect, capability, warmth, all of that stuff. And it's not just based on our accents. Although, by the way, what accent do you think sounds smartest to British people? Oh. Well, interestingly, French people speaking English is number 2. Yeah. The French English-speaking accent. Obviously, it's the Queen's English, but what do you reckon is considered to be the language with the least intellect? Yeah, it's guilty. It's Essex.
No, I'm not from there.
Are you?
Common.
Oh. Who else is from Essex? My fellow. Yeah. Let's prove them wrong. But it's also a gender thing. So based on our gender, unfortunately, your voice is going to get judged too. So there's a really iconic research project called One Angry Woman. It's only a few years old. And this research experiment took place in a courtroom, a simulated courtroom, and the jury were the research participants. And a man and a woman had to stand on the witness stand and talk, and they were told to get angry while they were talking. And the research participants were asked to say which of the two was trustworthy. What do you reckon the results were? So the angry man was authoritative. He was described as authoritative. He was described as trustworthy. The angry woman was described as hysterical. She was described as untrustworthy. So this is something that we have to navigate. Obviously, it's crap. We have to navigate an entire world full of bias and judgment. 6 minutes. So here's my really quick tips. Really quick tips for getting your voice out there and making it really strong. Number 1, know yourself. You have to understand your own voice before you put it out there. And this is where people normally slip up straight away, because either you get found out because you're so shallow and on the surface that there's really nothing to it, or you're so desperate for validation and likes and people going, yeah, no, I like that, it's really good, that you don't even speak. So the thing that primarily holds people back from putting themselves out there is, can you guess what this picture represents? Cringe. Cringe is the single biggest thing, and we've done some research on this. We did a piece of research this year on why women don't do speeches at their own weddings. I mean, some do. But cringe was the single biggest reason why. I have a whole story about cringe, but I don't have to. Oh, you're up to the time. They've got the time. What are you doing? Well, then I'm going to tell you my story about cringe. Because cringe is such a social, anthropological barrier to all of us. So let me tell you about the first social sighting of cringe in history. So in 1969, there was an anthropologist called Edmund Carpenter, and he was an arsehole. And he went to a tribe in Papua New Guinea called the Miami tribe. And this tribe were interesting because they'd never seen their own reflection. So the rivers around where they lived were a bit murky, so they'd never really see, they didn't have the opportunity for that narcissist moment. They didn't have mirrors, they didn't have cameras, any of that stuff. So this guy went there, highly unethical. It was in 1969, so all experiments were unethical. But he went there and he took a bunch of mirrors and a load of tape recorders so that this tribe could see their reflection for the first time. How do you reckon they reacted? Yeah. They hated it. They froze in fear, like they were almost paralyzed. They covered their eyes, they covered their mouths, they went rigid, physically rigid. And apparently this is the first sociological sighting of cringe, because it really perfectly demonstrates that moment when you move outside yourself and your sense of self, which is normally okay, and immediately you start to think about how other people are seeing you and how other people are judging you. So you have to power through that cringe, because we are all cringe to somebody. I know I am. At least 5% of this room, I am cringing out right now, and I do not care. At Good Shout, and I'll whiz through this, but if you want a copy, just give me a shout. My email address is amy@goodshoutcommunity.com. At Good Shout, we have a framework that helps you get to a place where you really know yourself and you really know your originality. We call it the 3 T's: your tone, your thing, and your temerity. So when it comes to every single person in this room should have a completely different tone of voice, by the way. So just as a bit of a technique to try and think about your tone of voice, what 3 words would you love people to think of when they think of you? Is one of them tenacious or weird or candid? You have to think about your tone of voice and how you show up and how you want to be remembered. Your thing is the thing that you want people to associate you with. That was amazing, that interview. And obviously Mac, has a really strong thing, mental health and sport, etc. And then your temerity is not a word that's used very often, but your temerity is your self-belief, it's your cockiness. Because if you don't sound like you believe what you're saying, then why on earth would anyone else believe what you're saying? Do you actually live the things that you're saying in real life and in social media? And you need to think about the impact you have on people. I'm not going to go through this. This is Jung's archetypes. Does anyone use this in work? For like brand strategy stuff. I don't recommend that, by the way, but I do recommend it as a tool to understand people. Human beings, psychologically, it's a good tool. This will tell you the impact that you have on people, whether you inspire them, you entertain them, etc. Next, know your USP. Obviously, we know what USP is. I mean your unique standout performance. So you, on a fucking brilliant day, you all know you on a good day. You know, you leave a pitch or you leave a meeting and you're like, oh my God, what happened there? You at your best. Understand how that looks, because it should look different for every single person. So, is it a bit chaotic like me? I own that. Or are you thoughtful? Are you pensive? Are you challenging? Are you provocative? You need to know, because you can't just get up here and say a few words. For God's sake, don't be like this.
When I was a kid, I thought I knew a lot. I thought I knew a thing or two about a thing or two, but I just didn't know much. Or as my dad used to say, you just don't know much. When I was a teenager, I learned a little bit more. And well, by the time I was an adult, I knew a lot. My name is Bowie Martinez-Reed, and I study knowledge and understanding of knowing at Harvard. And what we know now is known because we know it. But we're learning that what we understand about what we don't know, we'll never know until we learn it. Let's talk about the brain.
That's the best bit. Let's talk about the brain. Every single TED Talk. But we live in a business world where everyone's starting to talk the same, act the same, use the same mannerisms, walk 3 paces to the left, walk 4 paces to the right. Oh, there we go. Human beings are what's known as, and this is important to understand, human beings are what's known as imitative generalists, which means we mimic each other. So whether it's body language, sound, turns of phrase, in order to survive socially. So this is why everyone starts to use jargon and the same kind of jargon at work, is because all we're trying to do is survive socially, but you really have to try and buck that trend. There was an audit conducted of 64,000 university dissertations, and they found that the academic institutions where the dissertations were from that had the most jargon, hang on, I've said that terribly. There was an audit of 64,000 university dissertations, and the lower the status of the academic institution that the dissertation was from, the more likely they were to use jargon. My God, that was hard to say. So jargon is a sign of insecurity. So think about that in your next meeting tomorrow at work. It's a comfort blanket. It doesn't mean anything. Next, know your limit. I'm going to whiz through this, but if you do have a voice and you want to add value, how much value do you want to add? Because if you really want to make some change with your voice, you're going to piss some people off. And I say this confidently because I do. But you need to know who you're happy to disagree with. You need to know who you're happy to wind up. The amazing American activist, Maggie Kuhn, she was in the 1930s, fought for the reproductive rights of women in the 1930s. She said, stand before the people you fear and speak your mind, even if your voice shakes. And oh my God, I thoroughly fucking live by this. It's so important. If you're going to try and change something, you're going to get it wrong sometimes. You might even get trolled, but you kind of need to be okay with that. It's never been more important to be different. So there's an amazing psychological study from 2009 that created the Perceived Weird Index. Have you heard of this? By a guy called John O'Hanafin. And the Perceived Weird Index describes that perfect type of person who is literally able to drive change either in an industry or within an organization. And the sweet spot is you have to be weird enough so that you stand out and you don't get sucked into the cultural conditioning. And I would say that an industry like ours is very hot on cultural conditioning. So you have to be so weird that you don't get sucked into that, but you have to be normal enough that people trust you and they actually buy into what you say. So that's the sweet spot. That's my recommendation for everyone. And then finally, you're so unlucky, because the final two things that I was going to play were videos of me. Only because it's not a narcissistic thing, although that is my USP, but because it's easier to show you the videos rather than actually act them out. But you're not going to see them because I've got 10 seconds left. Oh, all right, fine. Yay! Fueling my... so the final one, and this is the one that actually really pains me. Bear in mind, I train hundreds of people in using their voice. This is the thing that I see more often than not. So watch this and tell me, analyse the shit out of it. Tell me what you like about it, if anything, and tell me what you hate about it.
So what it is, based on my experience and all the things that I've seen over the years, and in particular a few very specific years, is that for the most part, when it comes to the crunch, you know, at the end of the day, really what we're seeing, and actually, you know, not from every part of society, but in most parts of society, generally what the trend is that we often can encounter a variety of different sources of, you know, what I like to call, and actually not always call, but generally what I like to call, based on my experience and all the things that I've learned and I've seen, is to really identify as something that, you know, here and there can often be misconstrued as being irrelevant. But, you know, what I think from my perspective.
Do you understand? She's still going. She's still going. Do you understand how hard it was to do that? Right, be honest. Have you seen any panellists over the last 2 days that have done that? I see this all the time, though. Literally, as I was saying right at the beginning, people opening their mouths and not even knowing what they want to say. So at Good Shout, we have a very simple framework, the 3 Ps, for any kind of, even meetings, workshops, panels, conferences, whatever. Know your 3 Ps. So your first P is punch. You have to have some assertive statements. You have to have some sound bites. You have to have stuff that you say that asserts your personality. Then your proof, if you're putting yourself out there, for God's sake, have substance, have insight, enlighten people. And then finally, your progress, your so what, your new news, the stuff that you say that really adds value to your industry. So I'm going to show you this, but you're not going to see that. That's like 2 minutes long. I'll share it with you afterwards. So we're going to test that. This is me finished now. We're going to test this with our Good Shout TV live simulation news studio. I don't know if you've seen it. Has anyone tried it? Oh my God, so the rest of you have to try it. Cachet will sign you up. The rest of you have to try it.
Today on Good Shout TV, we have some breaking news.
We're giving you the chance to experience the pressure of being interviewed live in front of millions of viewers.
Put yourself in the hot seat with Good Shout TV.
Opportunity to try and experience the pressure of your, you know, nailing your 3 Ps, testing your voice, and holding your own under pressure. Finally, what I would say, oh my God, I'm so flustered. It's so important to experiment with your voice, to optimise your tone, to optimise your USP, and just see what happens, because when you do, what happens will probably be good. Thank you. Can I just get up to prove that I'm finished?